Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Yesterday, talked about gun fetish Barbie. Lauren Boebert on the floor saying, we in the U.S., we've got 46% of the world's guns. She says she thinks we need to get those numbers up, boys and girls. Because in her neck of the woods, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, that's just a fun weekend. Just a fun weekend. Now, according to the folks over at the Gun Violence Archive, there were 52 mass shootings in January of 2023 alone. And what are our friends in Congress doing? Well, Zippo, nothing. Well, they are. They're wearing AR-15 pins instead of American flags to show you how much they care about the country, how much they love the country. They're not kneeling, well, for the flag. Never mind. You know where this is going. Sadly today, though, and this is the problem here. Here's where we are. A New Jersey councilwoman, a Republican woman, shot dead in her car outside her home. Little community, Central Ohio. Man blows his brains out in the local junior high school. Did we see a lot of coverage? Oh yeah, it's just Thursday. Yeah, it's okay. It's just another day. Just another day in America. Another day. This school in Central Ohio. Not sure why the police were called. Not sure what it was, but stepfather was there with the stepkid and the mother. Cop pulls them aside. He pulls out a gun, blows his brains out. No real media attention whatsoever. But today, our friends in the House Republican Party, they got all the attention. It was grandstanding day. Well, every day in GOP land is grandstanding day. But today they brought a bill to the floor to denounce socialism in all of its forms. Yeah, I'm going to denounce socialism in all its forms. Now understand, this is a House resolution, which means nothing. There's no enforcement. There's no actual rule. It's performative. It's political theater. It's meant there. It's a vehicle. It's a vehicle for these attention-seeking clowns to get their daily fix, and to help the right-wing outrage machine keep America stupid and drugged with the outrage candy. And it's working. Oh, is it working? But this resolution is basically just a right-wing history of all of these bad socialists, and they conflate socialism and communism. But let's not have reality and facts and a real argument. We just have a point to make. The point is socialism bad. So they go through all this stuff, and people starved, and all the drill. You've heard it 1,000 times. And they come up with a couple of cute quotes from the founders. We're a hyper individualistic country, and to each his own, and that stuff. They finish up with, resolved by the House of Representatives that Congress denounces socialism in all forms and opposes the implementation of socialist policies in the United States. As they're wearing their AR-15 gun pins instead of the American flags. Now, here's the thing. We should have an honest discussion about what is and what isn't socialism, because there are a lot of mouth breathers out there who don't actually know what it is, can't even really spell it. We can have a conversation about whether some socialist programs are good or bad, how far we should go, what that line is. Now, what our friends who work for government, who have socialist jobs working for the government. That's what I love. These are people who get a socialist paycheck telling us we denounce socialism. What they're trying to tell us is that it's all bad and we want hyper capitalism. And this argument is not new. We've used these kind of scare words. We've used these kind of tactics over and over and over and over again. And look, no one uses deceptive language quite as well as the think tank approved, focus group tested Republican language machine. They are brilliant. They are masters at manipulating language to scare the you-know-what out of people. I go back to, Islamic terrorists, and I go back to some of the language that they were using around terrorism, and it was masterful. It scared people. You can't say it, and socialism is not a new one. So I decided to pull up my own little quote. I have a Google machine too. And on the Google machines, there was a speech that Harry Truman gave back on October 10th, 1952, where he said, socialism is a scare word they have hurled at every advance the people have made in the last 20 years. Socialism is what they called public power. Socialism is what they called Social Security. Socialism is what they called farm price supports. Socialism is what they called bank deposit insurance. Socialism is what they called the growth of free and independent labor organizations, and on and on. It's what they use to scare people. Oh, what? Is it bad? Oh, it's bad. There is nobody talking about socialism in the form that they're portraying here. Again, this is all political theater. It's all outrage candy. It's all meant to get them their spotlight, get them their moment on the F channel or the podcast circuit so that they could slam their fist and go, those Democrats are socialists. There are literally no socialists. The only avowed socialist is Bernie Sanders, and he's really not an actual socialist. He's a democratic socialist, which is kind of where, if you strip the labels aside and truly define them, is where the mass of America is. The old people I had lunch with today, we went to dinner today. And we went early, so the only people who go to early dinner are old white, angry, entitled old white people, the amazing thing is, who have lived the best years that this country has ever seen, that humanity has ever seen, has led the kind of comfortable existence that humanity has never known. And yet these people are angry and going on and on about how the poor welfare mothers are getting too much on their EBT cards and just but they're sitting there with their Social Security and their Medicare. They're sitting there having lived through a time period where the government, the evil government that they now decry, helped them every step. But I know they've been told repeatedly through the outrage machine that they whittled their own bootstraps and did that whole pulling up thing. You've heard it before. This is the amazing part of all this. Now, if we want to have a real conversation about socialism, okay, let's have an honest conversation. That's not what today was. Today was purely performative. This was so Kevin McCarthy can say, there were 100 Democrats who voted against this piece of legislation. They're socialists. No. See, if it were me, I wouldn't have showed up for the vote. I'd gone, this is stupid. I'm staying out of this. It's ridiculous. You're morons. Get a job. Tell me when you've got something that's going to make someone's life better. This doesn't. This is meant to divide. This is meant to anger. This is purely feeding the outrage machine. But that's just me and why I'm not in Congress. But if you want to have an actual conversation, do we need to have a social safety net? Do we need to have Social Security? Do we need to have Medicare? Do we need to have food stamp programs to help single mothers? Do we need to have things that take the harsh edges off of capitalism? We're a capitalist country, but we're not an unfettered capitalist country. We're moving there. We're getting there. And you look at the poverty rates, you look at the wage suppression, you look at the abusive conditions, you look at a lot of the stuff that's going on. The unfettered part of capitalism is taking over. And we haven't had that conversation. Because when you sit down and you actually talk to working people, they want their police force. They want their public fire department. They want their public schools. They want the roads paved. They want the bridges done. They want the potholes fixed. They want an infrastructure. They want, well, they want opportunities. And we're in this moment where, again, we've got a Republican Party hell-bent on, again, it's all about the performance. It's about the show. It's about the show. And the show is all about keeping people angry and pitted against each other and afraid in that bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy, that fear, that basic instinct. They're masters at it. And at a certain point, we, as the sane, the rational, the rest of us have to go, this stuff has to stop. Because again, I start off with, the reality is they're doing nothing. They're not doing their job, and we're paying them. These are public servants taking our tax dollars to shovel this kind of steaming pile of FCC, public tax dollars, but this kind of nonsense down our throats. And the frustrating and the angering part of this is the vast majority of people don't pay attention, aren't paying attention, and are okay with being just over-consumed with this kind of anger. Because that reflex, I'm not so, socialism's bad. We've been trained like this, so that when we privatize our sewers and our water systems and our highways and our parking authorities, and when we privatize our public parks, and when we privatized our healthcare, and when we gave away the commons, the things our grandparents built for us, the things that they said we needed as a society that we funded, when they sold that off for pennies to corporate interests who have been gouging us, because this socialism that they speak is so horrible. But we're gouged constantly, and we're robbed blind. But at least it's not socialism. At least it's not that. Now, I've been accused of being a socialist because I believe in Social Security. I believe in a national health care program that we pay into. I think we should have one giant health insurance pool that everyone is in. Socialized risk, absolutely. That I'm not quite sure how that would end humanity, other than be a much more efficient way to pay bills and much more efficient way to negotiate for price and a much more efficient way to just provide insurance to people. But I digress. This is not how we run a government. We've got children throwing temper tantrums, looking for attention. And this is the kind of thing that sends us in all the wrong directions. And again, today was nothing but purely performative. There was no legislation to say, hey, okay, how do we move forward? How do we help families put food on the table? How do we make sure that workers have the ability to earn a decent wage, work in safe conditions? How do we make sure we do any of that stuff? Oh, that's right. We shouldn't, because that's socialism. We should be at the mercy of the free market. We should be at the mercy of the corporations. Government should do nothing. So there should be nothing to ensure that you don't get cheated at work. There should be nothing to ensure that you get killed at work. There should be nothing that says that if you get hit by a car on the road, that there's a court system there that helps you get damages or hold someone accountable. There should be none of that, because that's socialism. Remember, government can't do anything. Government shouldn't do anything. Government is bad. This is what they're saying. This is what they're decrying. And they unanimously on the Republican side, socialism is bad. And all forms of socialism, all of them, all forms, they're very clear. All forms. Curious your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. against the idea of decrying and denouncing all socialism? Or is that Social Security, those old folks who were angry old folks who are complaining about that single mother with the EBT card? Curious your thoughts. Back after this.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So another performative display yesterday, you may remember. Matt Gaetz, the congressman from Florida. What do they call him? Congressman McForehead or something? Slappy McForehead or something? Evidently, he's got a thing who, we're going to have to say the Pledge of Allegiance before every committee hearing. And, I don't have a problem with that. Again, if you have to have these performative displays of false patriotism, knock yourself out. And you want to bring someone in to do that, yeah, great. I've never had a problem with that. And no one really should. Look, if you don't want to say the pledge, don't. If you don't want to stand for it, don't. That's your right as an American. And I'm okay with that. But I think Dave Cicilline had the right response, saying, look, okay, you want to bring people into this chamber to lead the pledge? Great. But they can't be someone who supported the insurrection. They can't be someone who was involved in any way to attempting to overthrow our government and overthrow our elections. And I think that's a sane, rational place to start. Now, of course, there are 146 people who voted against the certifying of the elections. So this could be an interesting moment where Slappy McForehead and clan, they may digress a bit. But let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are we doing?
Oh, we're hanging in there. So I found it very interesting that they, and I guess so did the one Democratic House of Representatives, I think he was from Massachusetts, that there was no definition of socialism or its forms.
Nope.
So I would assume that they did that to make it vague, so when something comes along that they don't like, they can say, oh, it's socialism.
No, this was all they do these resolutions all the time so that Democrats don't vote for it, and so that Kevin McCarthy did what he did today. And I can't believe that 109 Democrats refused to condemn socialism. That's all it was for. It was all to get the outrage candy so that the F channel and the outrage machine can foster on.
Well, true, but again, that leads the base to come up with their own definition. And honestly, I don't even think any of the Republicans could sit there and define for me what is communism, what is democracy, what is a democratic republic, and what is democratic socialism.
And then there
That's
lays
the sad part.
And there lies the problem. We've got an outrage machine who shoots us buzzwords and scares us into thinking that, oh my gosh, if we have a social program that's going to help people, we're going to end up like Pol Pot's government or the Bolsheviks or, oh my gosh, and they don't even know what that is, but they know to be afraid of it. Be very afraid. We're such a skittish society. We're such a skittish society.
It's, as you say, an Idiocracy, by the way. I've always loved that movie. And I just keep going, oh, yeah, yep. All we need now, Trump came close to the president that was depicted in the movie because if you remember, he was a former wrestler.
Yeah, I loved Camacho.
And then Trump was all into the wrestling, though he was not a wrestler. So I'm just going, really? Okay. But you have a good evening.
Thanks so much. I'd take Terry Crews as president any day over Donald Trump. At least he was smart enough to send the guy out in the fields and say, stop putting sports drinks on the crops. And if you haven't seen that Idiocracy, it's not really worth it anymore because we're living much, much further beyond what that movie, what the insanity that movie brought us. But here's the thing, and this is where, again, I come back to what the display was about. The display was simply about getting Democrats on their heels because they're for socialism. And you had Marsha Blackburn, the senator from Tennessee, saying, we must cut federal spending. Surely our massive bureaucracy can reduce spending by 1, 2, 3, or 5%. And I'm going, yeah, okay. What 5% are you talking about? Tell me what it is that you want to cut. And they won't. They won't tell us because we know what they're going to cut. They're going to cut programs that help working people. They're going to hurt the most vulnerable. They're not going to tax the wealthy. They're not going to take tax breaks away from corporations. They're not going to do any of the stuff that, rational, sane people would do at their kitchen tables. No, they're going to kick the most vulnerable because, they're down there anyway. Kicking up is really hard. But someone down on the thing, not that hard. And here's the thing. I go back to our dinner. Listening to these angry old white people talk about this single mother with the EBT card. This is what talk radio is talking about because Republicans right now are looking at blue states and these programs, these social programs, as a way to go. We're going to hold people accountable who cheated during the pandemic. We're not going to go after the people who took the millions and the millions. No, we're not going to go after the Mnuchins and the Republican Congress people no. We're going to go after those workers who got an extra couple $100. We're going to go after those people who got maybe a couple extra bucks on their EBT card and maybe did make it to the end of the month with groceries and maybe got a little extra in their unemployment benefits so that they were able to pay a bill or two. That's who they're going to go after. Not the millionaires and billionaires, you and me. And this is, mark my words, they're coming to blue states because this is all about political payback. And the question is, how much of it are we willing to put up with? These performative displays are just to get people prepped for what we know is coming. I want to hear your thoughts, though. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1848. That was the day the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed. It signaled the end of the Mexican-American War. The war began in May of 1846 when the United States sought to expand its annexation of Texas. It immediately became a partisan issue between pro- and anti-slavery forces. Southern Democrats and slave plantation owners favored war with Mexico. They hoped to undercut rising Northern industrial power with the expansion of slave territory. Whigs and Northern abolitionists opposed the war for the same reasons. After almost 2 years of fighting, the war ended. In exchange for $15 million, the United States gained 525,000 square miles of land. This territory included all or parts of Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. Mexico gave up all claims to Texas, and the Rio Grande was established as the border. The initial treaty promised protection of land, civil rights, and full citizenship for those Mexicans who stayed on the newly acquired territory. These guarantees were deleted from the final ratification. Expansionist aims reignited debates about the extension of slavery. The newly formed Free Soil Party gained traction with its campaign to limit, localize, and discourage slavery. Their banner read, "Free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men." Antagonisms were briefly tempered with the Compromise of 1850. This allowed California to be admitted as a free state. It also prevented the outlawing of slavery in the new territories. The slave trade was banned in the District of Columbia, but a new and more stringent fugitive slave law was enacted. Debates regarding expansion of slavery would rage on throughout the 1850s, culminating in the Civil War.
Big news from congressional Republicans. After years of failing to unearth any proof that America's elections are corrupted by flagrant cases of voter fraud, the GOP has now found a whopper. Unfortunately for the party's voter integrity police, what they've uncovered is not some nefarious Democratic plot, but a scheme of mass deception by one of their own Congress creditors, George Santos. Last November, he effectively stole a New York City congressional seat. How? By making himself up. Santos invented a fictional George that hid his criminal record and touted an amazing storybook past he never lived. No, he is not Jewish. His grandparents were not Holocaust survivors. He was not a volleyball star at a prestigious college he never even attended. He was not a renowned Wall Street banker, though he did help run a Florida Ponzi scheme. He was not a New York City real estate baron, and the mystery money that financed his campaign apparently came from nowhere. Naturally, when Congress's fraud-busting Republican leaders learned that this hyper-fraudster came from their own ranks, they promptly expelled him. Just kidding. Instead, Kevin McCarthy, the GOP's unscrupulous congressional leader, has fully embraced this defrauder as an honorable member of his legislative team, sanctimoniously declaring, quote, "The voters elected Santos to serve." That makes Kevin even more dishonest than George. 1. The people did not elect Santos, but voted for the caricature he concocted to fool them. 2. McCarthy doesn't give a damn about the integrity of elections. He's only clinging to George because his own support in the House is so iffy that he needs Santos's vote to save his own worthless political hide. This is Jim Hightower saying, Santos is a congenital liar, but McCarthy is a self-serving political hack, and neither one should be in public office.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Funny quote of the day over at the Washington Post from former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He said, "I've been amazed and horrified by how many people are frightened of a guy called Tucker Carlson." Has anybody heard of Tucker Carlson? What is that? What is with this guy? All these wonderful Republicans seem somehow intimidated by his perspective. And the thing is, in the UK, they look at someone like that snotty little bow tie wearing FCC. They would smack him around like FCC. Over here, wow. But yeah, good on Boris. I don't like Boris, but at least honest. Anyway, share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Our good friend it would be great. Wouldn't it be great if Boris went on with Schmucker and just battered him around? Because they don't put up. It would. We need better. We need better, and we need better. Anyway, share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. My good friend Sarah Burris, she's a reporter from Raw Story, rawstory.com. Sarah, I'm sorry, that was a horrible introduction, but the thought of Tucker Carlson just being grabbed by the bow tie and smacked around, that not literally, clearly, because I'm not advocating violence.
The thing is he's probably into that. I mean, really, right? Like, you can kind of spot him a little bit, and he's definitely somebody who might like to wear diapers or something.
Whoa. There's an image I did not want to have.
You're welcome.
There's a nightmare I'm going to have now, thanks to you. Thank you. But this is the thing. I mean, how is it that you look at today's performative displays over socialism, Sarah, there's socialism. There will not be socialism. And yet, nobody holding these people accountable. It's all this giant, it's this big political play. It's like it's political theater on steroids.
And even Nancy Mace, a Republican from North Carolina, pretty much admitted that whenever she spoke to folks after doing the Omar vote. She was like, I'm not really okay with this vote. And I really just think that we need to be, doing the work that the people sent us here to do. And it's like, oh, what a concept.
I should have had a V8.
Here's an idea. I should be doing my job. You think?
And all we seem to get are these performative displays. Yesterday it was, We're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance before committee meetings. I thought they already had that. Did you need to pass something to do that? I thought you did that as a matter of course. And now this, we condemn no socialism, without defining what socialism is, without having any discussion of what programs we're talking about, and any type of enforcement or point. It's just, we want to gotcha.
Well, remember whenever McCarthy said that the first thing that he was going to do as speaker is that they were going to read the whole Constitution like every day or something? Yeah. Well, first of all, that hasn't happened. So clearly he does not support the Constitution, obviously.
Or he can't read.
Right. But the thing is that if they're spending all of their time praying and doing the pledge and reading the Constitution and all of these performative acts, all of these, removing Democrats from random committees, then they don't actually have to govern. And no one will notice, oh, gee, you're not actually doing anything. They can just be like, well, we didn't get to that because, we spent 6 hours praying and reading the Constitution and wrapping ourselves in the flag and I don't know, whatever they do with it, whatever else they do with it.
Yeah. But I thought the first thing he was going to do was hit Nancy Pelosi with the gavel. I thought that was the first thing.
Yeah. Oh, God. It seems like maybe he had just a whole lot of things that he was going to do first. Remember how Donald Trump had that, where he was just like, the first thing I'm going to do on day one is going to be blah. And there were like 30 or 40 of those things. And then he got to the actual day, and then he just kind of screwed around and tweeted, tried to find the light switches, that kind of deal. Yeah. We're all like, surprise.
Now, speaking of Trump, he's pledged he's going to fight gender madness. He's fighting gender madness when again, more performative stuff. He's going to recognize only two genders.
Okay. To be fair, I'm pretty sure he could only recognize two genders. If he saw them, he would be very confused. You do you, Donald. I would be very curious to see if, Stormy Daniels, obviously a lady, but if it wasn't Stormy Daniels and there was another adult film star that was a trans person, would he know? Would he know the difference? I bet he wouldn't.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is where you even get me. I would want to know the difference, and I think I would have a problem down the road if there were. And I think this is a conversation that we as a society haven't had, because there are some expectations when you go down the road in relationships that have to be worked out, that I don't know that we've done kind of the background work on.
It's true. One of the most important things in a relationship is to talk about who is going to do the laundry. And that is not a conversation we have as a society.
No, it's true.
Is
But
that what you meant?
Who's also, no, I meant who's going to have the children? Because I clearly cannot have them.
That is very true. I mean, I would love to see you try, but
Not
yeah.
me.
But I think
because
honestly, like those are the kind of conversations you have in every relationship. Do you want kids? Yes or no? And I feel like that is a natural
Yep.
conversation that just happens. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be like, well, biologically I can't. And that would apply to people who could, be trans pre-op or post-op. It could be somebody who had some kind of medical issue and had a hysterectomy. That could be, anybody over 50. I don't know. Like there's a whole lot of stuff in there. So it doesn't necessarily even mean, I would love to have kids, but I can't.
But here's the thing.
It doesn't necessarily mean a gender.
There's so many more things that need to be addressed.
Yeah, like who's gonna do the laundry?
Yeah.
Where are your values on unions?
Exactly. See, now this is where, but he's pledged he's going to take this on. This is going to be his big thing. This is going to be his big thing.
And I say yes, power to him. I think it would be awesome to have the Republican Party basically running in 2024 on nothing but these BS culture war issues where it's all about gay people and trans people and weddings and marriages and Disney World and whatever. Because I think that, once we get to 2024, we'll actually have some legitimate concerns that Americans want to talk about. And if that's all they can talk about is, down with Disney, come on. That's not going to get you anywhere. It's not even going to get you past Iowa.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's one of those things where the outrage machine just keeps funneling this stuff. If the F channel says it's important, now evidently Trump's upset with the F channel, not giving him the love.
Yeah, which I think is funny because, I mean, he's such a huge viewer. You would think that they would be nicer to him because there's so much of their advertising that will eventually probably come from Trump. I don't know if he'll do ads on their channel, but yeah, I guess all he does is watch it all day and he gets mad when they're not nice about him. So, okay, bummer. And I mean, now you've got DirecTV has OAN and Newsmax are off. So his options are very slim. I don't know what kind of cable he has down there. If it's DirecTV or something else, but yeah. I mean, the best thing about him watching Fox News all the time is that the Lincoln Project can show ads down there targeting Palm Beach County and do ads on Fox News, and it just drives him up the wall. It's the best thing in the world.
And speaking of Florida, evidently DeSantis back at war with Disney.
Yeah. I guess that they pulled some of the funding off of it's the weirdest story. Like Disneyland as a 36 mile megaplex is its own incorporated city.
Right.
And the reason for it is so that you can have police, fire, IMSA,
public transportation. The best public transportation in the country, definitely. May I add you.
And it's all basically handled by the park, by the company. And they, in the great state of Florida, DeSantis really wants to take all of that away and wants to have the state vote to take that decades-long law away from them, which is basically going to end up costing the county, the actual county, I want to say, what was it, like something like $2.5 million in just the first year, and then every year after that it's going to be more. And it's just, again, like it's this performative stuff that ultimately ends up taxing Floridians, and they're probably going to end up keeping the ticket prices the same, even though they're not paying for their own fire and IMSA. But at the same time, like if you've got all of that stuff, like if you've got the ambulance being run by the county and you're across the park or something, like how long does it take you to get there to somebody who's injured? So that's really scary for, anybody who's got a little bit of a dodgy heart and can't do more than Small World. Just saying. Know your defibrillator.
Know your defibrillator. No, but the last time we were there, it was like the best public transit ever. You never had to wait but a couple of minutes for a train, and you go, "Can we do this? This is a way forward. Can we build this around the country?"
And the buses too, so you've got the monorail, and then you've got the buses, and there's a bunch of different. There's the ferry. You can even take a ferry.
Yeah. No, all that transit.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, if only.
My dream is if some other state would figure out how to get enough private money and state funds to offer Disney the option to move out of Florida. I think that would be so funny for them to just sort of call his bluff and be like, all right, see ya.
Here's your swampland back.
Yeah. Because that's the thing, is it really was swampland. It was undevelopable is what they called it. And so it's like, well, have fun. Good luck. So, yeah,
speaking on the fun front, because again, I'm coming back to today's. I can't get this out of my head today, and this is where I started today's show. You had a shooting last night of a councilwoman in New Jersey, murdered out front of her home. Yeah, in Central Ohio, you had a guy, a stepfather, blow his head off in a local junior high. Got very little news coverage. This ridiculous, we're denouncing socialism. This is all over the news. Everywhere you look, it's, the Democrats, they voted for socialism. And it's, these investigations that we know are coming, the weaponization committee and all of this. I mean, are we going to tire of this soon?
I think so. And I think that is the big piece of this where, I feel like with Republicans, when they went through this during the 90s, there's only so much that you can saber rattle. There's only so much that you can throw a fit about, and people would just finally start tuning it out.
You think? Because I think we were a completely different society in the 90s. There were still people around who were old enough to go, cut out the nonsense. My grandparents were still around to smack us around a bit, to tell us to sit down and shut up. The old people now, angry and entitled and snotty, and man, I can't be around old white people anymore. I gotta stop. It's bad for my soul.
Dude, for real, you need to find some different friends. You're freaking me out. We're gonna find you some hippies to hang out with or something. But the thing is you're really competing a lot for television these days. And so if Republicans aren't getting any attention other than Fox News, again, nobody cares. Nobody's going to be glued to this the way that they were, the January 6th committee, which had millions and millions of viewers. You're not going to have that prime time spot on CBS to do some, random right-wing hearing about, CRT. It's just not going to happen. And so I think that they truly believe that, somehow they're going to capture America with these crazy ideas that they think, everybody is with them on. And it's I really think that they believe their own crap.
But the real stuff, they're not going to go after it. I look at Jamie Raskin, who looked at the Durham investigation and said, that's the weaponization of the Justice Department. They literally, dug this guy up to specifically target Democrats. This is the stuff that Republicans are complaining and whining about. Here it is. They're not going to investigate that.
No, they're definitely not. The Senate will. Dick Durbin has already made it pretty clear that he wants to investigate this. One of the things that I heard one of the Mueller prosecutors say today is that there are two different parts of the Justice Department. There's the the inspector general, and then there's OPR, which is the personnel kind of review. And both of those pieces of the Justice Department essentially investigate the ethics of the people working there.
Right.
So they're going to both be on this thing. Plus, you've got the Senate. And I think you've got, I don't know if the New York Times has more information, but they kind of have started to drop a little bit of hints. Like a couple of the reporters on this story have dropped hints that there's more coming to this story than just what they reported about Durham so far. This coordination between the Attorney General and the Special Counsel, like that is a level of corruption that, the Justice Department really tried to fix after Watergate. That was the reason that they started the Personnel Review Board at the DOJ. And so it'll be interesting to see if more shoes are going to drop and what that then means for hopefully for Bill Barr's career.
It's just going to mean more shoes. I mean, this is where I've become jaded in this world. There are tons of shoes all over the living room.
Yeah.
And we're tripping over them, all over them, and we're being pummeled with the shoes as they're falling, and yet nobody's being made to clean them up. Your analogy, not mine, which is why I'm belaboring this. Nobody's forced to clean this mess up. Nobody's being held accountable. Nobody has to put them back in the shoe rack. None of that. Nobody's going to jail. Nobody's got the bracelets. Nothing.
Yeah, that is very true. I wonder if this is something too where we can, somebody can complain to can file a complaint to the Bar Association about Bill Barr, because clearly there are ethics that were violated here that you swear as an attorney to uphold.
Yeah. Yeah, but these people are shameless. I mean,
they are.
Just shameless. Finally, I want to get your thoughts on, evidently the FBI is, I guess, finally going to look into George Santos's animal rescue charity, because why not? Why not steal money from a dying dog?
Right. I mean, it's nice to see that they actually care. I think too, it's part of also an SEC violation, because there's some online fraud that happened with the GoFundMe thing. So I'm wondering if that will kind of lead over into more than one sort of probe, or that they'll be able to coordinate on something, because I mean, it seems like the FBI is really busy these days, what with them, not being ready for January 6th.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's a piece of it. I mean, there's that investigation. There's a state investigation. There's DOJ told the FEC this week, because he had a whole bunch of campaign finance fraud stuff. DOJ said, you know what, FEC, we got this one, which is great because the FEC doesn't actually function. So
the question I've got on this, does this mean eventually he's going to go to jail? He's going to get removed, or is this a slap on the wrist thing? Don't do it again. Pay a fine. Move, keep your job, and stay in Congress.
I think that there's enough here that he goes to jail. I don't know which case it will be. It may very well be the SEC stuff related to the Ponzi scheme he worked for without being a registered broker. The campaign finance stuff today we figured out that there was $100,000 that just went missing. It's like, okay, well, who among us doesn't lose 100?
Yeah.
Or not 100 million, $100,000.
$100,000.
Who among us doesn't lose $100,000 in the couch cushions, right? Pocket change. So that piece of it, and then who donated the money to his campaign, or who donated the loan that he could give to his campaign. And so, like, some of these, you really got to ask, like, is this a foreign country? Is this the mob? Like, it's the kind of question where you wonder, yeah, he could be in legal trouble, but is this something that could get him killed?
Yeah. Don't walk through any open windows there, George.
That's scary. But well, I think he ends up in jail. I really do.
All right, that you got money on jail? I say he's going to stay in Congress, because it's what we do.
Hey, here's the thing. He may actually stay as an elected official while being in jail, because Republicans wouldn't vote to remove him.
There you go.
That's a possibility.
So we can both be right. Win-win. See how that works? Win-win. Great stuff, Sarah. I appreciate you taking time and sharing your expertise and all of your important work. I appreciate the time.
My pleasure. Have a good weekend.
Good stuff. Thanks so much, our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her stuff over at rawstory.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1821. That was the birthday of the first woman to earn her medical degree in the United States. Her name was Elizabeth Blackwell. She was born in Bristol, England. Her family moved to the United States when she was just 11 years old. Elizabeth decided she wanted to pursue a career in medicine. She believed that women patients should have the option of a female doctor. But it was not easy to make her dream come true. Medicine was considered men's work. Undeterred, Elizabeth began to study medicine on her own. Medical schools rejected her applications. Finally, she was accepted to the Geneva Medical College in New York. Most students at the school were horrified by the idea of a woman studying medicine, but she won many over with her ability and hard work. In 1849, she completed her work and graduated. But her difficulties were not over. No hospital in New York would hire her. She was even refused rental space when landlords found out she wanted it for a woman-run medical practice. Finally, she purchased a home for her practice. She also started a medical dispensary for the poor in New York City. She was later joined in her work by her sister, who also graduated with a medical degree. She went on to lecture on medicine in England, becoming the first woman to have her name on the British Medical Register. She and her sister helped to train nurses for service during the Civil War. They also founded a women's medical college that operated for 31 years. By her determination, Elizabeth Blackwell helped open the door for future generations of women to work in the field of medicine. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So it was 63 years ago today that 4 black college students sat at a whites-only lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, the Woolworths counter, the Greensboro 4, as some are calling them. When we were down there, we were corrected right quick. It's the A&T 4. It's interesting how Greensboro has now taken them on as their own. It's it's the Greensboro 4 now. It wasn't always that. But the thing is you go down, there's a museum there now. And again, horrible treatment of people, tourism, right there in Greensboro. The Woolworth store there, it's a museum to civil rights. You go down into the downstairs where the diner was, where the lunch counter was, and it is impeccably restored. And they walk you through what it would have been like, and it's incredible. And the strength and the courage that it must have taken to go into that den and to take the abuse that those 4 took. It's the reason we need history to be taught. I didn't know anything about, I knew that these things happened. I didn't know how bad. I didn't know all of the ins and outs. And this, again, is why Black History Month is so important. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
It is the biggest annual profit for any U.S. or European oil company ever.
Big Oil posts all-time high record profits. Biden hits the road to promote infrastructure upgrades. Plus,
no company will ever be able to stick a mine on top of some of the best salmon habitat in the world.
EPA vetoes the controversial proposed Pebble mine in Alaska.
For real this time?
For real this time.
All of those stories, and we'll see. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
What's Exxon doing with all of that money?
Well, a lot of it is going back to shareholders. And that means big paydays for investment firms and for executives. But, it's not just Wall Street. Exxon is a very popular stock for retirement accounts.
Well, they certainly do sound excited about those record profits over there at NPR. Guess they don't call them National Petroleum Radio for nothing. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I know it's stunning to hear about the record profits at the big oil companies, but first, let's take a look at some of the damage they're causing, shall we?
Yes, a grim assessment. The people of Earth saw 42 weather disasters in 2022 that caused more than $1 billion in damage each. That is according to a new analysis by global insurance company Gallagher Re. Those $42 billion weather disasters included 3 mega disasters costing more than $20 billion each in 2022. Hurricane Ian in the U.S. and drought in the U.S. and Europe. Plus, a record heat wave killed more than 40,000 people across Europe. The total damage wrought globally by weather disasters in 2022 was $360 billion. The researchers found the fingerprints of climate change on virtually every major disaster.
Yeah, but did you hear? ExxonMobil had their largest profits ever.
Yep, oil giant ExxonMobil posted record annual profits for 2022, even as Americans struggled to afford gasoline, home heating, food, and consumer goods. Exxon alone made $56 billion in net profit in 2022. That's more than $6 million an hour, an all-time high, not just for the company, but for the entire Western oil industry, thanks to Russia's war on Ukraine straining fossil energy supplies.
So when the prices for gas went through the roof over the past year, it wasn't because they were having difficulty finding supply. It was because they were increasing their prices to get to these record profits.
Exactly. In a press conference, Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island highlighted his bill to levy a windfall profit tax on oil companies like the European Union has done. And Whitehouse called out the oil industry's propaganda campaign that falsely blamed the Biden administration for high energy prices while the industry was gleefully taking advantage of war profiteering and price gouging. And Senator Whitehouse added this.
When you're looking at how to fund the $11 billion international loss and damage pledge that Joe Biden made, you might want to think about the $200 billion that the fossil fuel industry just extracted in excess profits. They are not stepping up to make good in international loss and damage for the harm that they cause. They have to be held accountable.
Did you think they'd step up, Senator Whitehouse? Did you really?
In other news, President Biden was on the road this week to highlight long-awaited infrastructure repairs and upgrades thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law. On Monday in Baltimore, he announced the expansion of a 150-year-old rail tunnel that was damaged by extreme flooding during Hurricane Sandy, which will create 20,000 construction jobs and reduce car traffic and air pollution. Biden also traveled to New York to announce $300 million in funding to complete the first phase of the Hudson River Tunnel project, which was abandoned mid-construction by the Trump administration. And finally, over the past week, we've reported on the Biden administration protecting Alaska's Tongass National Forest from logging and the pristine watershed of Minnesota's Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness from mining pollution. Now, the Biden Environmental Protection Agency has effectively vetoed the controversial proposed Pebble mine in Alaska. Using a rare authority under the Clean Water Act, the agency banned the dumping of mine waste in the watershed of Alaska's Bristol Bay, concluding it would permanently destroy 100 miles of streams and wetlands and pose an unacceptable threat to the world's most prolific salmon fishery. It is a huge victory for Native American tribes and Alaska's sustainable billion-dollar commercial fishing and outdoor recreation industries. As one tribal advocate said, quote, "You can have a mine for 50 years or salmon for 1,000 years. You cannot have both."
Very good news up north. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, Check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the Fed raised the interest rates again, and look, I've been saying for a while, it appears to me, and look, I'm just a dumb truck driver, appears to me that the forces to be in the Federal Reserve by aggressively raising rates and saying they're going to raise them again down the road. They want the spur on this recession. You've got Republicans in the House holding the country hostage over the debt ceiling. Seems to want to bring on a massive recession. You look on all the social media apps and all of these prognosticators and all of these pundits saying Armageddon's coming and it's coming in the summer, like they're wishing and hoping and wanting the kind of chaos that, well, the Fed and Republicans seem to be heading us towards. And you go, why? Well, I've been saying for a while, it's to crush workers and put them back in their place. But I've decided to ask somebody who probably knows a lot more about this than I do. That's why I've asked my good friend Mateus Vernango to come talk with us. He's a professor of economics at Bucknell University. You can check out his website, nakedkeynesianism.blogspot.com. Good stuff there. Mateus, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So am I getting this right? I'm looking at the fact that the Fed again raised interest rates, not as aggressively as they did before, but a 0.25% is a pretty good jump. I'm looking at what's going on in the House with this debt ceiling hostage situation. It just seems to me like the forces to be want to cause chaos. If it's not to crush workers who are asking for better wages, it's to make Biden look bad. I'm curious what you're seeing.
Yeah, I would agree with you. You can come and teach. Don't feel that you don't know what's going on. I think you have a good handle of what's going on. So we'll invite you for a visiting position at Bucknell. Because that's spot on. I think that I would differentiate a little bit between the Fed and Powell and Republicans in Congress in the following things. So I think the Fed wants to cause they may say that they want a soft landing, meaning that they want to stop inflation without causing a recession. The truth is that the downside for the Fed, if they cause a recession in comparison to say they cannot stop inflation, although they're not stopping inflation, stop by itself. At this point, I should say, if you look at the last 6 months of inflation, not the annualized inflation, which is what they show, and the annualized is whatever it is, 6 something or 5 something. But the last 6 months, the annualized inflation is around the target of 2%. So inflation stopped because the price of commodities, oil, energy commodities sort of stopped going up. There are some things like eggs and whatnot, things in the news, but for the most part, inflation stopped. But the downside for the Fed, if they look weak on inflation, is terrible. On the other hand, if there is a recession, not a big deal. I mean, financial markets will be okay with that because what they want to do is stop wages and put the labor class back in its place. The Republicans in Congress, it's more complicated. I think that they want really chaos. It may very well cause if the Fed already didn't cause a recession. I think that the jury is still out on that. And I think it's very possible that the effects of the interest rates on the housing market that are already visible may throw us in a recession, and that's already inevitable. But let's say we dodge that bullet and we don't fall into a recession because of the Fed. Then I think Republicans want to throw us in a recession, and then I think it's political, not just to mess with the working class. I think they also want. I mean, the 20 Republicans that the whole thing with McCarthy, they if they prove something is that this group is capable of perhaps for the first time creating a situation in which we not just shut down the government, but actually default on that by not raising the ceiling. I have no inside information on this.
No, there's no inside information. I truly believe they want to shoot the hostage.
I think it's very likely that they want, and they prove that they are willing to do it.
It's one of these things that it's like you tell a kid don't touch the hot stove. You keep telling them don't touch the hot stove, bad things will happen. They got to touch the hot stove to find out what the bad thing is. I believe there are people who are in the house who are going, well, what's the worst thing can happen? So what, we default on it. We print the money. What's the big deal? So let's walk through this idea then for a little bit, because I've actually had people say, well, so what? What if we default? What if we don't pay any of it back? What's the worst thing that happens?
Well, that's it has happened in countries like Argentina when you don't pay foreign debt in general. I mean, countries don't tend to do this to their own currencies. In their own currencies, countries normally don't have limits on the ability to spend in their own currency. Normally, Argentina is on the verge of a default, and we defaulted God knows exactly how many times, but it's on that in dollars, and we don't print dollars. What happens with that is that the economy collapses. So Argentina, the GDP collapses was 20% when last time it happened in 2002. If you go to Greece, Greece uses the euro and defaulted in euros. So it never quite defaulted. I should say they always arrange a thing, but it was very similar. But they don't control the euro because essentially that's the European Central Bank. So they are in the hands of a foreign central bank. And GDP is now 14 years past the crisis in 2010, and it started in 2008, 23% below its peak, the GDP. So imagine shrinking the economy 20% and staying for a whole decade and a half in there. That's what we're talking about. I mean, these people are insane. This is not fun. Italy, that never defaulted, but it's in the same grip of the euro. People ask me, why is, last week Argentina and Brazil talked about a common currency, said, it's a terrible idea because you lose your ability to fund yourself in your own currency. And Italy, that, has not defaulted. It's still below what it was before the crisis, 12 years ago. So those are the reasons why you want to default. Their inability to pay. I mean, we stop the size of the U.S. federal government is humongous. Think of what we do if we stop, let alone all the other things that U.S. represents globally. The U.S. is, for good or for bad, still we spend 10 times what the next one spends, in the military. So the consequences for U.S. abroad are unimaginable. So it is difficult to wrap our heads around what they're trying to do. And again, they want to see in Portuguese we say to see this circus barn. They're gonna get it. They're gonna have it is unimaginable to me that we're gonna do that. But I think you're right. And then so it's not a recession. You see the danger of that. It's much more complicated than just a mere recession. This would be something unprecedented.
Again, another created crisis, which they're masterful at doing. But you brought up Greece a second ago, and a lot of my conservative friends love to point to Greece and say the United States is going to be just like Greece because we have, about 110, 120% debt to GDP ratio right now. Greece was something like 700, if I remember right. We're not really Greece, but they love to use that as the example. How bad is our debt problem?
We don't have a debt problem. That's the issue. So Greece has a debt problem because they have it's in euros, and the German and French elites decided that they're not going to pay for the catching up of Greece, or the Greek working class. Let alone not even the German and the French working class. They're trying to stiff the German and the French working class, let alone let the Greek or the Italian, working class have a decent, living standards. So it's not the case in the United States. The 120%, whatever it is, 30 something $30 trillion and GDP is 24, whatever it is. So it's not so. Huge amount depends on your ability to pay. We have no problem of paying this debt. There is no significant problem of paying the debt in your own currency. There is ability to raise funds. If you think along those lines, we can raise taxes on the wealthy. There are many things that can be done. even things when it's the same logic as, for example, people talk about the Social Security. We're broke, we cannot pay. Of course we can pay. There are many ways in which this can be solved. We can extend, Social Security taxes to people that make more money, which, we're don't
not going to do.
Reason. Yes, I know. It's political, but that's a political decision. So, but the other thing that I always want to remind people of, so think of this. It's a graph I always show in class. The English economy between 1750 and 1850 had always more than 100% debt to GDP ratio. At the peak, which was during the Napoleonic Wars, 1815 or so, it's around 260% of GDP, 260%. And I always ask kids, what happened between 1750 and 1850? And it takes them a while, but there is always, thank God, somebody that says the Industrial Revolution. So the biggest change since the agricultural revolution in the history of humanity that leads to modernity and the rise of England to be the hegemonic country around the world, the most powerful country that they've seen up to that point, it's done on a pile of debt. The problem with debt is not the debt per se, it's how you use the debt.
Right.
And so the problem I have with the 120% debt, and people say it's excessive. Well, it's excessive depending for what? If you're asking me, for having the kind of services that the working class and the people have, the health that we have, for having the kinds of schools that we have, yes, we're expending too much. But can we have this kind of spending and use it to provide decent standards of living for the working class? Of course we can. So that's part of the problem. It's how we're using the debt, not that we are accumulating it. So incurring in the debt to go to college, I always tell them it's a good idea. But, if you don't get a good job and cannot repay it, that's the problem. So right. If you use the money, the debt, to build an infrastructure, to be competitive, to give good good jobs to working class people, what's the problem with the debt? There's nothing wrong. We can pay it back. Why? Because we're having productive jobs. We're creating the income that will create the taxes that will pay back eventually, the debt that was accumulated. There is no problem with that. The dynamic of that is easy to understand. And, it's as simple as the rate of growth of the economy has to be higher than the rate of interest on the debt you're accumulating. It's as simple as that. And, and that's doable. By the way, the Fed can help and control the interest rate on long-term bonds of, U.S. government. So if they work together, there should be no reason why you should be broke in your own currency. So we're not Greece in that sense. What I'm saying is, if we decided to do what the Greek were forced to do because we're stupid, pardon my French, then, well, sure, we're going to have a catastrophe. But is it necessary, the catastrophe? So in the Greek case, it was a Greek tragedy. It was inevitable. It was out of their hands. I think that the left government of Syriza tried to get away from that. They couldn't. The Germans said no. We don't have that. We have just 20 Republicans, perhaps more, if McCarthy goes with the crazies, that are taking the government hostage and may take it to and by the way, Biden is right in saying that we shouldn't negotiate. There's no reason for austerity and for cutting spending because of the debt ceiling. There's no reason to do that. So
there's not.
I think Biden is absolutely correct.
But here's the thing. I mean, and I had someone explain this to me the other day that I wanted to get your perspective on, because they're saying, well, all this inflation, it's Biden inflation, and everyone's blaming Joe Biden. And I'm going, this is a moment that kind of a historical kind of anomaly. I mean, we're coming out of a massive recession. The demand was kind of pent up, and it's kind of just like after World War II. This person was explaining to me after World War II, there was kind of there was inflation because we went from a war economy to a production economy. And I remember my grandparents talking about the boom that was the early 50s and that. But we handled it differently. There was massive government spending on housing and massive government spending on education. There was massive investment that helped offset that. There were strong labor unions that skyrocketed wages. We're not doing those things now.
No, and then also this, the recovery, although was fast, we're not even close to, I mean, the amount of, so during the Second World War, inflation was caused by too much demand. There was, the fiscal deficits of the government were of the order of 45% of GDP. We have nothing comparable to that. People are exaggerating. So the inflation is gone. As I said, if you look at the annualized inflation over the last 6 months, it's gone. Inflation is going to be gone. I know that people haven't felt it yet, But in the numbers, it's already gone, and the Fed knows that. I mean, if I know it, you can be sure that the Fed knows this. So the inflation is not. No, I don't think inflation will linger for too long, unless again something happens. The war in Ukraine will continue, so God knows what will happen. But there are many things that helped. For example, the good summer in the winter. The winter is not too cold, and so the price of energy didn't go too much up in Europe. That helps us. And so there are many things that have helped so far. So inflation will not get out of hand. It's not. Inflation is only bad. People have to think of why you're trying to solve a problem. Inflation is only bad because it hurts people at the bottom of the income distribution. And so if you want to solve that problem, increase the wages of the relatively poor. And that's the way of solving. Let's increase the minimum wage.
No,
Let's
absolutely. No, I tell the story all the time.
That's the way to start with solving those problems. So I don't think that that's the issue. But I don't think also that we're not doing the investment and all of those things because of Biden even called his Build Back Better or whatever it was the name. It was sort of a discussion of they gave it the name to whatever ended up happening, the anti-inflation sort of package. So they see this as a package to fight those supply side snags that allowed prices to go up. But I think that we're not going to do anything like that, because that would be given Democrats, and in particular the sort of more progressive strand of the Democrats that have been asking for something like a New Deal for a while, a very strong argument. The issue that transformed, I think, the U.S. in the 40s and 50s and 60s, up to the 60s, when things again got more complicated politically, was that it was so evident that the effort for the war that was brought by the government and that was an extension of the New Deal did work. If you give, and the government spends humongous amounts and goes and spends and gives people housing, education, the GI Bill, and all of those things get better. And, and that's a dangerous thing. So I think that they don't want that kind of thing to happen.
But Mateus, that's socialism. And today we had a vote in the House to say we will take no forms of socialism.
Yeah, well, it's a good debate. So, it's I spend time, nobody knows who Keynes is anymore, but I spend a good time. Keynes is the sort of thinker of all of these ideas that we connect, British thinker connected to all of these ideas in the New Deal and whatnot to some extent. And somebody said, oh, he was a socialist. I said, no, he was a liberal. What happened is that socialists at some point became Keynesians. And so they adopted this idea that government intervention can actually, Keynes' notion was we can save capitalism from itself. So we don't have to be socialist and communist. What we can do is go out and spend, and the government can provide all of the things while you still have a private sector that it's independent, thriving, and you have the private enterprise that still dominates the economy. But in a mixed economy in which the government provides the basic services that everybody needs. Generously for the working class. And so that arrangement, the socialists said, oh, you know what, we're okay with that. So keep capitalism, but we'll go for this kind of stuff. So it's the socialists that became Keynesian. And conservatives for a while became Keynesian. And so that was the consensus of the 50s and 60s that did work out. But, society is complicated. Sometimes you don't just want to be doing well. What you want is to be better than the other guy. And so I think that that's part of what led to the break of that compromise.
Now, last question I've got for you. I keep hearing people talking about this summer is going to be the end of humanity, the end of the world. Armageddon's coming. Wall Street's going to crash. Your stocks are going. Everything. It's all over, Mateus. There's a realignment. It's the deep state. Whatever. However you want to frame it. Are we concerned that the end of the world is coming in the summer?
I don't think, I'm afraid of what they're going to do. Even I'll say this, even if they allow for a default or a shutdown of the government, I don't think we're going to be Greece even. So I don't think we can live 15 years of, below the 20% below the GDP level of, the peak. So what I think the cooler heads in the Republican Party will prevail. What I do think is that they can take a significant price for that, and that might have implications for 2024. for the election. So I think that's a possible scenario. So I think that the Republicans, very dangerously, let's say the party trained Republicans, they're using the crazy ones to obtain concessions from the government. But those concessions can come with a price that it's very high. Because we don't know who wins in 2024, and we know I know. Look at Brazil, the copycat, stuff has been very hard. Democracy is in line, and so 2024 we don't know who comes. Ron DeSantis, Trump himself. So it's very dangerous. We're playing with fire.
There you go. Mateus, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. Check out the website, nakedkeynesianism.blogspot.com, if you want to check out Mateus Venango's writings. Appreciate the time, man.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. You want to take a quick break right back. The potty trained ones. I'm stealing that. I am stealing that. Right back after this. Stick around. That they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
The potty trained ones. I'm definitely stealing that because it's a perfect frame. I mean, again, you look at today the shenanigans that went on in the House of Representatives. And of course they went after Ilhan Omar and they expelled her from her committee, which you knew was going to happen. You knew it was going to happen. They were going to find their reason, and for me the reality is Democrats had to expect this was going to happen because this is retribution, and it's about the right using this as a tool to raise money. Our politics, our governance anymore with the people who are in charge there, it's not about getting stuff done, because what's gotten done since they got there? Nothing. It's all about feeding the outrage machine. It's all been about, all negative stuff. And now we find that there's a Chinese spy blimp, circling around Montana. You've got this Chinese app, this TikTok, that's infecting our children's brains with this algorithm that just keeps feeding them this poison, and yet we're unable to deal with any of that stuff. Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, he evidently wrote to Google and Apple, urging both of them to take TikTok off of the app stores. Because at some point they're going to have to figure out how to deal with this, because you have a direct link from the Chinese communist government to our children. But there was no talk of that from House Republicans. Nothing. Because again, they use TikTok. I get their videos. I get their little pieces. And it's poison. And this is where we as a society, we need a better government. We need better people in the House of Representatives. We need to demand more. And maybe, and I keep hearing this, that there are still some establishment Republicans left. There are still some people who are going to, the cooler heads will prevail. I don't know. When you've got to start at the potty training level, I don't know that you get there fast enough. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1821. That was the birthday of the first woman to earn her medical degree in the United States. Her name was Elizabeth Blackwell. She was born in Bristol, England. Her family moved to the United States when she was just 11 years old. Elizabeth decided she wanted to pursue a career in medicine. She believed that women patients should have the option of a female doctor. But it was not easy to make her dream come true. Medicine was considered men's work. Undeterred, Elizabeth began to study medicine on her own. Medical schools rejected her applications. Finally, she was accepted to the Geneva Medical College in New York. Most students at the school were horrified by the idea of a woman studying medicine, but she won many over with her ability and hard work. In 1849, she completed her work and graduated. But her difficulties were not over. No hospital in New York would hire her. She was even refused rental space when landlords found out she wanted it for a woman-run medical practice. Finally, she purchased a home for her practice. She also started a medical dispensary for the poor in New York City. She was later joined in her work by her sister, who also graduated with a medical degree. She went on to lecture on medicine in England, becoming the first woman to have her name on the British Medical Register. She and her sister helped to train nurses for service during the Civil War. They also founded a women's medical college that operated for 31 years. By her determination, Elizabeth Blackwell helped open the door for future generations of women to work in the field of medicine. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Big news from congressional Republicans. After years of failing to unearth any proof that America's elections are corrupted by flagrant cases of voter fraud, the GOP has now found a whopper. Unfortunately for the party's voter integrity police, what they've uncovered is not some nefarious Democratic plot, but a scheme of mass deception by one of their own Congress critters, George Santos. Last November, he effectively stole a New York City congressional seat. How? By making himself up. Santos invented a fictional George that hid his criminal record and touted an amazing storybook past he never lived. No, he is not Jewish. His grandparents were not Holocaust survivors. He was not a volleyball star at a prestigious college he never even attended. He was not a renowned Wall Street banker, though he did help run a Florida Ponzi scheme. He was not a New York City real estate baron, and the mystery money that financed his campaign apparently came from nowhere. Naturally, when Congress's fraud-busting Republican leaders learned that this hyper-fraudster came from their own ranks, they promptly expelled him. Just kidding. Instead, Kevin McCarthy, the GOP's unscrupulous congressional leader, has fully embraced this defrauder as an honorable member of his legislative team, sanctimoniously declaring, quote, "The voters elected Santos to serve." That makes Kevin even more dishonest than George. 1, the people did not elect Santos, but voted for the caricature he concocted to fool them. 2, McCarthy doesn't give a damn about the integrity of elections. He's only clinging to George because his own support in the House is so iffy that he needs Santos's vote to save his own worthless political hide. This is Jim Hightower saying, Santos is a congenital liar, but McCarthy is a self-serving political hack, and neither one should be in public office.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So hard to believe that it's been 30 years since Bill Clinton signed the Family Medical Leave Act. Something that, and again, it's one of these, man, am I getting old? It's one of these things that, when our union was fighting to get this passed, I helped work on this campaign all those years ago. To get not only this passed, because there was nothing before. If you had a loved one who got sick, if you got sick, if you had the birth of a child, any of this stuff, and you needed time off, you were out of luck. So this gave the basis of people to say, no, family values matters. But the paid part of it was just, we couldn't get that through. And it's amazing to me, the fact that the people who tell us that they believe so much in family and family values and how much they love the children. Here's an idea. All those people out there fighting to force people to have children. How about we start with making family leave a paid benefit so that we want to bring children into the world? Here's, again, a start. And here to share some thoughts on the 30th anniversary of the Family Medical Leave Act, I've asked Emily Andrews to come talk with us. She's the director of the Education, Labor, and Worker Justice Program there at the Center for Law and Social Policy. CLASP.org is their website. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick. It's wonderful to be here.
So this at the time was a huge victory, and I don't know if you probably don't remember it, but it was an enormous victory at the time for working people to say, look, if we get sick, if I have a loved one who's sick, if we bring children into the world, this gives us a right to spend time with them, which had not been there before. But it's one of those things where average everyday working people can't afford to take extended periods of time without pay. So while it was a huge victory, it came at a cost, I thought.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I wasn't old enough to be fighting for it, but I am older than paid family medical leave. Yes, it was a watershed moment. It was a huge boon to workers' rights, workers' protection. There was nothing before it. It's an incredibly important piece of legislation. And still to this day, last year alone, 15 million workers took leave under FMLA, and they were able to return to their jobs, and they were able to have health insurance continue while they were on leave. And it's not just the pay. The FMLA itself, even though it is a huge protection for workers, itself is flawed. There's restrictions there. And unfortunately, due to those restrictions about how big the employer, the size of the employer, over how long you've worked for that employer, how many hours you worked in the last year, all of these things can reduce your eligibility for even unpaid leave. Yeah. So in this system that we're currently operating under, only 44% of working Americans are ineligible for even unpaid leave protections, which is just criminal.
Yeah, and the thing is, well, again, you go back, this was historic at the time, 30 years ago, and at the time we took what we could get. And I remember the argument being, hey, this is a massive step forward. This is an enormous victory for working people. We're going to get to the next place. We're gonna. At the time, everyone was talking about trying to tie it to unemployment benefits to say, hey, look, you can't work because we'll open it up to unemployment so that people could get at least a little bit of resource to live on. That's over the years hasn't happened. And we were told, all of these other things that weeded people out, we would work towards down the line, like a lot of social programs, like Medicare and Medicaid. We were told that was the analogy we were giving. We'd make it better. We haven't really done that, have we?
No, unfortunately. There's a number of bills just to even improve the number of folks who are covered by FMLA that can't make it across the finish line. And then there's this huge question of the need for paid leave in this country. We are the only industrialized country without paid leave. It's just shocking. And so, of course, the biggest obstacle to taking FMLA is that folks can't afford it. They can't afford to be off work for 12 weeks. Very few workers can afford that. And so that is the next step. And so the anniversary is bittersweet because it was supposed to be a first step. And here we are 30 years later, and we have not taken the next step.
I over my lifetime, I've used it. I think I've used it 5 times. My ex-wife's parents were terminally ill. I used it incrementally. We were able to use incremental days to take them back and forth to the hospital. When each of my children were born, I have 3 children. We took I took 6 weeks with 2 of them, 7 weeks with one, because that's what we could afford. Would I have loved to spend all 12 weeks with the children when they came home? Absolutely. But back to that paid component part of it, just couldn't do it. It didn't have the resources to do. Do you find that's what we're seeing people would want, like me, to take those additional weeks, but the resource just aren't there? Because again, I come back to this. We're told, there are certain political parties that are family values folks, and that we love the children. And I'm sure you've heard that rhetoric time and time again.
Familiar. Yes, it does.
This seems like a perfect place to, I don't know, put up or shut up.
I 100% agree. And I don't think it's just that individuals want to take this leave. So many workers need to take this leave. So I'll tell my own leave story. I am a mother, and even in the best circumstances, childbirth is an incredibly difficult experience. It can leave you battered and bruised, and millions of women have to go back to work within 2 weeks of giving birth. When I gave birth, 2 weeks, I couldn't even walk upstairs. I couldn't walk upstairs until my 3rd week after postpartum. I couldn't even fathom going back to work, having to drive a car, having to be in an office 8 hours a day, much less having to be on a factory floor, having to be, whatever my job in a service sector job where I'm on my feet all day would have been unthinkable. But actually, this is the reality we're living under. And this is the reality that many politicians who claim, exactly as you're saying, to be in favor of families, this is the reality that they've left us with.
Yeah. Now, and I go back to my own experience. I've always been a union member. I've always been fortunate enough to be protected by labor union contracts. And I remember the first time I went to use it for the birth of a child, company told me, no, you can't take it. That doesn't cover that. We're not letting you go. You can't have it. And I'm like, I'm going because it's the law, and filed grievance and all this stuff. And my mind, where I'm at now, is I wonder how many people companies are able to bully them into believing that it's not covered, and then they don't get to take it. And again, there's so many of these scenarios where, again, we were told this was going to be improved as we went down the road, that we should be on this anniversary committing that in 30 years from now, we get to the place where we need to be, or in 3 years.
Yes, and even when folks have the right to paid leave, 11 states in the District of Columbia have passed paid leave legislation, and we find one of the top reasons why workers don't take it is because they're fearful of retaliation and losing their jobs. And so even when there is job protection written into this legislation, the power balance of this country still allows employers to put the fear within workers that they'll lose their job. So yes, I think more education is always needed around these bills, and more enforcement.
And again, I come back to, as I always do when we talk about employment, another reason, another example of why every working person needs to have a union contract to protect them and give them job security on the job, so that they have the ability to stand up for their rights. And this is a working person's right. This was fought for. I remember phone calls and letters and marching and all kinds of stuff to get this done. This was meant for people to take. This was meant to help families, and to have these employers be able to bully and harass and intimidate is not what the intention of the law was.
Of course not. And this is why I love this show. There is no better job protection than a union contract. And we've talked before about how excited we are to see this big wave of organizing. We need to see more of it, because there's strength in numbers, and union contracts and unions can protect workers.
Now, here's the thing, and now we've been talking about it from the workers' perspective. And look, I'm all about working people getting the best opportunities they can, not just for the work that they do, but for their families, and balance life-work balance and all that stuff as well. But this is also good for employers as well, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. We've seen that in states that have passed, for FMLA, most definitely. For paid leave, yes, of course. We've seen in states that have passed paid family leave, there is good returns for businesses. We see turnover drop. We see women's connection to the labor force be maintained. A lot of times when women or anyone has to leave their job, instead of being able to take leave, then that employer needs to hire new staff, needs to train new people. We see reduced turnover when we have both FMLA and paid family leave. We also see a real benefit for small employers when we have paid family leave mandated by the state. So it can be hard for small employers to compete with big businesses who are able to offer these benefits. And so things like a mandate and a state-sponsored paid family leave program really help small businesses compete and attract.
No, and this is where, again, I come back to the unemployment system is a perfect mechanism to do this. It was a good idea back 30 years ago. And I think it's a good idea now.
Yeah, I mean, we got to figure it out. One of the, what's before Congress right now is the Family Act, and this has been introduced multiple times. And this is a guaranteed comprehensive paid family leave program. How this would work is it's a payroll tax. There's a small tax on payroll for employees. There's a tax on employers, and so it's really a social insurance system. And the way it breaks down for the taxed employees, the average worker would pay about $2 a week. So it's like a cup of coffee for a guaranteed benefit of paid family leave whenever you need it. So that's really kind of how we're thinking about how to pay for a social insurance paid leave program. Everybody buys in. It's kind of owned by the people, and they get to take it when they need it.
But isn't that what unemployment is? I mean, it's the same exact thing. The employers pay into it, the employees pay into it. It's a social insurance program. It seems like if we were to have a conversation around, how we provide a safety net for working people that was much more comprehensive than these Band-Aids and these piecemeal programs, we would come up with a better system. But the problem is we've got so many people who tell us that they believe in family values and they love the children doing these performative things like we saw today in the House of Representatives saying we decry socialism and we'll do nothing, no forms of socialism. And yet, Social Security, Medicare, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, public safety laws, worker compensation laws, all of these things have a component of social to them that completely out of their minds. And this is why we can't have nice things.
That's right. The scary part is there's actually some very damaging Republican proposals. For example, Marco Rubio's got an idea that instead of funding a paid leave program, workers could actually steal from their future Social Security earnings. And so we're talking about really like robbing yourself of a secure retirement in your old age and using that money for paid leave now.
Which is literally the dumbest thing anyone could ever propose. And if you ask any money manager ever, because we just sat down with my kids, my son's 16, my oldest daughter's 20. When they first got their first job, 15 years old, we got them into a Roth IRA and said, you never touch this, ever. Right. Not until you get to the end. And if you do, I'll come back and I'll beat you myself. To have a policy that says, no, that's okay, is irresponsible on steroids and kind of shows me exactly what they think of working people. Now, I guess last line of questioning I got two lines of questioning. First, the negative, because we were told, and I want to get your thoughts if this is out there. We were told 30 years ago that this would be rife with fraud, abuse, and waste, and people were going to abuse this program like none other. Do you find that working people are abusing this, that they're taking advantage of the good-heartedness of this program and their employers as was predicted back then by a certain political party and the foes of this?
Absolutely not. I don't have the cold hard fraud statistics for you, but I can tell you as both, I was actually a union steward and a union member, and helping folks through their FMLA process. This is serious business. This is when folks they're in crisis. They need help. They need to take leave to be with their families or to care for themselves. And there's medical certification required. There's all kinds of verification required. So no, we don't see huge fraud with FMLA.
Yeah, again, you hit on a buzzword there that most people probably don't know what is. You said you were a union steward, and this is, again, another reason why I believe people should have union contracts and be members of unions, because they have people like you who can help them navigate things like family medical leave, like unemployment when times hit. And they don't know all of the angles and they don't know all of the information. There's a network of help there, and I think that's really important. So last question I've got for you. What do we do from this point? It's great. We've got this anniversary, recognize the victory that it was, but the commitment forward has got to be, we've got to do better. What should we be doing?
Yeah, I mean, the answer. It's organize. But there's some exciting movement. We did with the Build Back Better legislation that passed the House last year, it was a high watermark for paid leave because it was included in that bill. So we need to hold on to that idea and that victory. We need to push for a guaranteed federal paid leave program. And there's a lot of exciting movement happening in the states. As I mentioned, 11 states in the District of Columbia have already passed a paid leave law that guarantees workers in those states paid leave, and it just keeps rolling. There's the election in 2022, we saw some Democratic trifectas come into play, and so those states are now thinking about passing paid leave legislation. It's not the perfect solution. It leaves out a lot of states. It particularly leaves out southern states where we know there's a high concentration of workers of color who are not going to get this state paid leave policy because of the Republicans who control those states. And so we really need to keep our eyes on the prize, which is a federal program.
Got a lot of work to do, but again, today, take the victory, but commit to making it better tomorrow, and we will be doing that. Emily, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. I hope you'll come back and talk with us again real soon.
Would love to. Thanks so much for having me.
Outstanding. Emily Andrews. She is, like I said, the Director of Education, Labor, and Worker Justice at the Center for Law and Social Policy, clasp.org, the website. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at their website. Can take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929, and 3,000 workers in New South Wales, Australia were locked out of their jobs. Australia was in the midst of the Great Depression. A judge had ruled that the timber industry could increase the work week from 44 hours to 48, while simultaneously lowering the workers' wages. Standing firm in opposition, the workers refused to comply with the mandatory 4-hour increase in work without pay. The company responded by charging in the courts that the workers had gone on strike. This invoked penalties under the 1928 Arbitration Amendment Act. During the strike, women played an important role, holding weekly meetings and gathering food donations from throughout Sydney for the families impacted by the lockout. Women delivered speeches in support of the strikers, harassed scab workers, and held fundraisers to support the cause. Trade unions in the city also supported the strike, holding a rally of 25,000 workers in March. Then, the same judge who had decided on the increase in hours ordered the union to hold a secret ballot vote on the issue of the strike. This marked the first time a secret ballot vote over a strike had occurred in Australia. In a protest demonstration, 3,000 timber workers burned their ballots in defiance. They also burned an effigy of the judge. When the secret vote finally occurred, management's proposals were roundly defeated by a margin of more than 5-1. In the end, however, it was a losing battle. The ravages of the Great Depression were too much to overcome. After more than 8 weeks on strike, the workers returned to the 48-hour workweek. Leaders of the strike faced criminal charges of unlawful conspiracy by violence and threats of violence, but were eventually acquitted by a jury. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So, again, it's hard to believe it's been 30 years. And it's been equally hard to believe that we haven't made things better. This is I go back to it, and I remember the argument being, take the win. There's no paid component. Take the win on family medical leave, and we'll get to it. We'll do what they did to Social Security, to Medicare. really to Medicare. Because Medicare, when it first passed, wasn't that great of a benefit. It really wasn't. It was mostly for the very poor. It was, and over the years, people, hey, this isn't bad. We like this. Hey, we should do more of this. Hey, we want more. Yeah, more. And it expanded. They kept, because people wanted more. This didn't happen that way. And a lot of it had to do by the fact that Republicans did a masterful job of blocking it. Corporate pushback was huge. And at the time, the fact that this got pushed through was just incredible. And I remember, our union at the time was pushing for it, and doing some lobbying and doing some stuff around letter writing campaigns and stuff that we did back then, and legislators, telling the stories of being just like no other being lobbied on this issue. Now understand, 30 years ago, lobbying was nothing like it is today. It wasn't the industry that it is today. The pressure that they felt to stop this was nowhere close to the amount of full-on, coordinated attacks that would happen today. And what's happened over these years is corporate America has gotten a lot smarter. And this is another one of those issues that working people want. You ask anybody who's used it, and they're grateful for it. I'm grateful for the chance to have spent time when our kids were born, to just be there with them in those first days. Whereas before, you went to work the next day. You didn't go to work the day of sometimes. Corporate America has done an amazing job of building an echo chamber of right-wing media outlets and powerful voices, of a lobbying arm that is second to none, of a think tank structure that creates all this chaos and all this stuff, that this propaganda. Because again, you think about today in the House of Representatives, they said no forms of socialism, none whatsoever, nothing. Would something like the Family Medical Leave Act pass today? Could it happen? And I no. The answer is flat out no. Could any of the things that help build the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization, National Labor Relations Act, Social Security, unemployment, minimum wage, maximum hour laws, could any of those things pass in today's environment? The answer is no. Because corporate America has got us by the FCC. This is one of those moments where we've got to ask ourselves, when these performative displays, when the children who haven't been potty trained yet have their little fits and need attention and pursue resolutions that have no means, no enforcement, no reason other than the outrage and divide, do we eventually say no? Enough? Do we throw these bums out? Because again, family leave is one of those things that, look, I've talked about it over the years of how I've been fortunate to use it for 6-7 weeks at a time. It's the most we could afford. Would have loved to go on the 12. As would just about any working family. This is something that if you're going to talk about family values, if you're going to talk about we want to push children into the world, if you're going to talk about that, you got to have the policies to back it up. And this is one of them. This is a small one. This is a small one. This is a no-brainer. But you know who this benefits? This benefits working people. Because our wealthy folks, the people up at the top, they got it. They've already got these things. The fact that we don't have a maternity policy in this country, shameful. The fact that we don't have paid leave is shameful. We're the laughing stock of the globe because of what we put up with. Want to hear your thoughts, though. Think it's ever going to happen? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Want to hear your thoughts. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you download the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours, and you can make us your favorite podcast. I appreciate you tuning in. Look forward to seeing you back here next time. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.